Today we're taking a closer look at the brand new Aputure Storm 400X, which is a fresh addition to the Storm series lineup. Now, if you're familiar with Aputure's lighting family, you'll already know about the tiny 80C, the powerful 1000C and 1200X, and of course the massive XT52. Well, this new 400X fills an important gap in that lineup, and let me tell you, it is worth paying attention to. Looking inside the case of the 400X, you can see everything is very neatly organized. You get a 35-degree reflector, a power cable and head cable, and this one is a 5-pin cable with a red accent on one end and a black one on the other. So you always know right away which one is for the ballast and which one is for the light. And I think this is a very nice little detail. Then we've got the ballast tucked away in here, and of course the light itself right here. One thing you will notice is that the ballast of the 400X is much more compact than the one from the 600X, and it's also been redesigned. Everything now sits on the top, so the power input, the DMX in and out, and the head connection, which has an obvious red cover. Having everything on the top is a really great design because this frees up the sides for V-mount plates. And yes, you can apparently run this light at 100% battery power, so not like the 50% limit we got on the 600 lineup. Another pro of having every cable connection on the top is that you can now actually set the ballast down flat on the floor, which can be really handy in some situations. Looking at the front of the ballast is where you'll find all the typical controls. Starting at the top right, you'll find the menu button where you can access the different light modes, control settings, and system settings. Next to that, a light mode button will take you directly to all the different light modes, a preset button which will take you to any light presets you might have saved, a back button which will obviously take you back to the previous window, and as you could already tell, turning the big knob rolls through the menus or the settings, and you can deselect or select something if you just push it down. Lastly, you'll find the power button at the bottom. So the 400X features Aputure's new Pro Lock system like all the other Storm series lights, and if you've never seen this before, you basically drop in your modifier and then twist the Pro Lock and the modifier is secured. So it's a much easier and secure way of attaching modifiers compared to your standard twisting Bowens mount. And like all the other Storm fixtures, the 400X also uses Aputure's Blair color engine, so blue, lime, amber, red, and indigo. But we'll talk more about that in just a second. Size-wise, it's really compact and quite small for what this light can do. It's slightly smaller but chunkier than the 300D, and compared to the 600X, it's noticeably smaller but also a little bit fatter. Also, the carrying case of the 400X is a lot smaller than the 600X case. It does, however, not have any wheels. Aputure has kept the design consistent with the rest of the Storm lineup, with the red accents in different places. And let's be honest, this is just a very beautiful looking light, even though of course the performance is what actually counts. In terms of build quality, the 400X also has an IP65 weather rating, so it is dust and water resistant. That means the Storm 400X can work in extreme environments, and there are seals on every connector and around the components, so you can use the lamp head, the ballast, and the cabling outside in the rain. Now, with the release of this new 400X, Aputure is also releasing a brand new Fresnel, the CF7, and it comes in this carrying case that fits the lens as well as the barn doors. And what's great is you can actually fit the Fresnel with the barn doors attached in this case. Now, we'll have a closer look at the performance of this Fresnel in just a second, but comparing it to the older F10 Fresnel, I can already tell you it's a lot smaller, and it's also just a lot smoother to adjust. Alright, now that we've gone over the details of this new light, let's go ahead and test the output of the 400X and compare it to a few other Aputure lights. Alright, so we've got the 300D, the 600X, and the 400X set up, all of them with their reflector on there, and they're all set to 5600 Kelvin, and I'm about 1 meter away from all of these lights, and then we're gonna just do a little output test. So I'm gonna turn off the fill light here, and then let's start off with the 300D. So we've got 40,000 lux and 3,720 foot candle. Next, let's switch over to the 600X. So here we've got 64,300 lux and 5,970 foot candle. But what's interesting is the CCT rating is saying it's 5193 Kelvin, although the light is set to 5600 Kelvin. All right, let's try the 400X. All right, so here we've got 63,900 lux and 5,930 foot candle with a CCT rating of 5,617. So that's very good. All right, next let's compare the 600X and the 400X set to 4,000 Kelvin. So the 600X is measuring 60,600 lux and 5,630 foot candles with a CCT of 3,782. Let's switch over to the 400X. And here we're measuring 63,300 lux, 5,880 foot candle with a CCT of 4,041. All right, let's switch over to 3,200 Kelvin. So this is 3,200 Kelvin on the 600X. And we're measuring 48,200 lux, 4,480 foot candle, and 3,071 Kelvin. On the 400X, we're measuring 57,900 lux, 5,380 foot candle with a CCT of 3,233. All right, so now I've got the CF7 Fresnel on the 400X and the older F10 Fresnel on the 600X, and we're gonna see how these two compare. All right, so this is the 600X with the Fresnel at 5600 Kelvin, and we've got 78,300 lux and 7,270 foot candles with a CCT range of 5,297. Next, the 400X, also the Fresnel on there, 5600 Kelvin, and we're measuring 64,800 lux, 6,020 foot candle, and 5,667 Kelvin. Now, the biggest difference when comparing these lights, and especially with the 600X, is that the 400X has Aputure's Blare chip inside. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what Blare is, it basically means it has blue, lime, amber, red, and indigo chips inside the cob here, and that gives you much higher color fidelity. That means you're not only getting full green magenta shift, but also the option to dial in color. Now, it's not the full spectrum color you're getting from something like the 1000C's CG engine, but honestly, for a bicolor X light, it's really impressive. All right, now looking at the price of the 400X, it is currently $1,059 US, which is really incredibly good value for a light like this. Also, the CF7 Fresnel here is very well priced at $199 US. If we compare that to the Aputure 600X, that one is currently priced at around $1,400 US. Or some of the competitors like the Nanlite Forza 500B Mark II, which is priced at $1,200 US, and the Godox NOLED M600 Bi at $1,600 US. Now, if we have a look and compare some of their specs, the Aputure 400X has a max output at 5600 Kelvin, 1 meter with a reflector of 64,600 lux. It has a color temperature of 2500 Kelvin to 10,000 Kelvin. The Aputure 600X, on the other hand, has a max output of 63,900 lux and a range from 2,700 Kelvin to 6,500 Kelvin. The Nanlite 500B Mark II has a slightly higher max output of 67,320 lux, but it only has a temperature range from 2,700 Kelvin to 6,500 Kelvin. The Godox has a pretty insane output of 198,000 lux, but also a more limited temperature range from 2,800 Kelvin to 6,500 Kelvin. So again, just over $1,000 for this 400X is ridiculously good value. All right, so if you are currently using the 300D, 300X, or even the 600X, this new 400X might actually be your ideal upgrade. But also, if you're looking at getting the perfect interview light or just all around good fixture, I would say that the 400X is probably gonna be the best bang for your buck. With that said, the 400X won't be able to replace the 600D, and there is still a noticeable gap between the 400X and the 1000C or the 1200X in Aputure Storm lineup. So maybe a new 600 or 800 light is already in the works, who knows, but until then, the 400X sits in a sweet spot of its own. Alright, that's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching, and if you have any questions, definitely drop them down in the comments. See you guys in the next one. Bye!